Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel confirmation hearing of the Chief Constable appointment. Technology.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Testing. Can everyone hear? Well, I'll start again. Get to here, I think. Welcome anyway to the Police and Crime Panel confirmation hearing for the appointment of the Chief Constable for Nottinghamshire, which I appreciate a most important appointment. We have got quite a few substitute members here today, so perhaps we can take first of all any apologies, and then I'm going to ask everyone around the room just to indicate to colleagues who they're representing. I'll sort out the technology, I think. Okay. Any apologies for absence at all?
Apologies for absence were received from Councillor David Ellis, Councillor Terry Cox, Councillor John Shepherd, substituted by Councillor Madeline Richardson, Councillor Paul Taylor, substituted by Councillor Jean Hall, and Councillor Linda Woodings, substituted by Councillor Michael Edwards.
Thank you very much. I think it would be helpful as people won't know everyone. Perhaps we could start with you, Mayor Abrahams, and everyone just introduce themselves to the people sitting opposite. Thank you.
Yeah, Andy Abrahams, the elected Mayor of Mansfield.
Leslie Dolby, independent member.
Michael Edwards, Nottingham City Councillor, Meadows Ward.
Councillor Jenkins, Nottingham City Council.
Councillor Jean Hall, Newark and Sherwood, Alderson Ward.
Councillor English, Rushworth Borough, portfolio officer environmental safety.
Sue Harding, an independent member.
Councillor John Lockby, member for Communities Protection, Ashfield District Council.
Councillor Madeline Richardson, ambassador of District Council in Worksop, North East.
Thank you. Christine Osborne, Chair.
Noel McMenamin, the scrutiny officer for the Police and Crime Panel.
Nicola Gessler, support officer for Police and Crime Panel.
Angela Candola, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Gary Godden, Police and Crime Commissioner.
Michelle Butcher, PCC's Chief Executive Monitoring Officer.
Rachel Motter, and Governance and Compliance Manager of PCC.
Good afternoon, Steve Cooper, the Acting Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire Police.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Mr. Cooper. You're the most important person here for us today. But just to inform members, he has informed me that there is possibly a booked telephone call that he'd arranged prior to today's meeting. It's very important, and has asked if he could be excused if his phone happens to go off. It was something that couldn't be rearranged. So we hope that we make it all through, but we understand that sometimes higher authority calls us importantly. Thank you. So if I may start by any apologies for absence at all. I've just gone through that, because I'm got to doing thing. Declarations of interest by any members or officers.
Yeah. I'd just like to declare that I've had a conditional offer to be a PCSO in the Nottingham Police Force, but I've not got an offer. I'm not working for them
yet. Just to make clear that legal advice has been taken by both Newark and Sherwood District Council and us as host authority, and the feeling is that that does not preclude Councillor Hall from speaking.
Thank you very much. We do have substitutes, and they've introduced themselves to you. So I think without further ado, can I also welcome Mr. Lockley? Thank you. I think you're on mute.
Apologies, I was on mute, but thank you, Chair.
Okay. Would it be helpful before we start, perhaps if you just gave us a very quick comment about the process you led on behalf of the Commissioner for the appointment?
If it's all right, Chair, what we thought we'd do is the Commissioner would just formally put his notification to the panel. I would just talk about the criteria and then hand over to the independent member, Chair, if that's okay.
Perfect.
So I'm Gary Godman, Police and Crime Commissioner. Can I just thank you all for convening today? I know it's been a short notice, and I know this has been a drawn-out process, but I'm really delighted to be in front of you today to put my proposed appointment of Chief Constable in front of you. So, as I say, it's my job and my duty as Commissioner of Nottinghamshire. I am required under the Police Reform Act and Social Responsibility Act of 2011 to appoint a Chief Constable for our police force area and to notify this panel of my proposed appointment. Following a rigorous open and transparent recruitment process, I am formally proposing Steve Cooper as my preferred candidate for the role of Chief Constable for Nottinghamshire Police. Steve has demonstrated through a demanding assessment and interview process that he possesses the leadership experience and vision required to lead the force forward. All pre-employment checks have been completed to my satisfaction. I am confident that Steve Cooper is the right person to build on the progress made in recent years and to deliver the priorities set out in my police and crime plan for a safer Nottinghamshire for all. I invite the panel to review my report, scrutinise the process and consider independent members' assurance that the process was fair, open and based on merit. I look forward to answering your questions and to your recommendations regarding this important appointment. I shall now hand over to Michelle Duxbury, my Chief Executive, just to talk briefly about the criteria for the confirmation process before we hand over to Andrew.
Thanks, Commissioner. And the panel will have had circulated to it quite a pack of papers as required under the legislation. Section 38 of the 2011 Act, as the Commissioner alludes to, governs this process and the panel's role in it. And Schedule 8 of the process sets out the criteria that you are considering today in relation to the confirmation process. First of all, the PCC is required to put forward the name of the person, which he has done, and temporary Chief Constable Cooper is here today. Second is the criteria used to assess the suitability of the candidate for the appointment. That criteria is set out throughout the documentation that you've been provided, but if I can draw your attention particularly to page 101 of your pack, that is the College of Policing Competencies and Values Framework for the role of Chief Constable nationally, and that is the criteria on which Deputy Chief Constable Cooper was judged in the rigorous assessment process that you will hear about and have already read about in the reports. And then thirdly, why the candidate satisfies those criteria. Well, the report that I've prepared for the Commissioner, which I won't go through in front of you today, sets out how the candidate met that criteria, and I'll hand over in a minute to the independent member who sat on the appointment panel with the Commissioner, who will talk a little bit more about that. And then finally, you are required in terms of the criteria for the confirmation hearing to consider the terms and conditions on which the candidate is to be appointed. And I'll direct your attention to pages 32 and 33 of your packs. And that is an appendix to the report in relation to the notification. And that is the recruitment pack that was advertised by the Commissioner for the role of Chief Constable. And it describes the terms and conditions on which candidates were applying. The salary is set nationally, and the other terms and conditions follow a national template for Chief Constable appointments. So those are the four elements of the criteria before you today, which I say on the Commissioner's behalf are satisfied. But you will hear now from Andrew Lockley in relation to his role on the appointment panel, his role in terms of the process to provide the panel with assurances. Chair, I'll hand over to Mr. Lockley now.
Thank you very much. Chair, I'm not going to go through my report in massive detail, which I imagine will be of relief to everybody, but the report begins at page 141 of your bundle. I think it may be the last document of your bundle. So with your agreement, Chair, I'm going to just pick out the key points. The first one is that the role of the independent member is set out in a Home Office circular and has become, I think, normal in the appointment of Chief Constables. and the role of the independent member is to give an assurance that the appointment process has been conducted fairly, openly, and based on merit. What the independent member looks for is the extent to which the appointment panel fulfills its responsibility to challenge and test candidates' suitability against the requirements of the role throughout. So shortlisting, assessment exercises and interview. In this case, I was asked to become the independent member after the application pack had been sent out to candidates, but from then on I was fully involved in the shortlisting, listened to the feedbacks from the College of Policing. I'll come back to that in a minute, and present for the candidates' presentations and the interview, and also participated in the discussion when the Police and Crime Commissioner came to his decision. The panel itself consisted of 4 people: the Police and Crime Commissioner, Sir Andy Marsh, who is the Chief Executive of the College of Policing and the former Chief Constable, Miss Amy Harhoff, who's Chief Executive of the East Midlands Combined County Authority, and then myself. Michelle Buttery was in attendance for some of the parts of the process, but didn't take any part in the discussions or the selection. It was helpful, in my view, to have Sir Andy Marsh there. He's a very experienced former Chief Constable, now in charge of the College of Policing, and his staff designed the competency and values framework, which was crucial to the assessment of the candidate's suitability for this role. In addition, the College of Policing provided occupational psychology support, as is referred to in a number of occasions in the papers and in particular in my report. So in relation to the competencies and values framework, if you want to be able to see them conveniently, they're set out on page 143 of the bundle, which is page 3, the top of page 3 of my report. There are 6 competencies and 3 values. The Commissioner decided that there would be 3 of the competencies. 3 of the competencies would be the focus of the questions asked of the candidates, but all the competencies and values were to the fore throughout the whole process, as I hope will be apparent. The shortlisting process consisted of the panel, except for Sir Andy Marsh, who'd made his contributions in writing in advance, looking at the applications of the 2 candidates and being satisfied that they reached the thresholds for eligibility and were therefore suitable to be interviewed for the post. The assessment process leading to the final decision took place over 2 days in December. On the first day, the candidates had meetings with internal and external stakeholder panels. The internal stakeholder panels were staff and the members of the workforce in the constabulary, and the external stakeholder panel were representatives of key stakeholders across Nottinghamshire. The psychologists from the College of Policing were present in the meetings which the candidates had with the stakeholder panels, and gave the appointment panel summaries of their feedback as a result of being present and listening to what had occurred. There was then a media exercise in which a journalist who'd been briefed as to the background and so on, interviewed the two candidates for approximately 10 minutes, I think. And those interviews were video recorded and then shown to the appointment panel. There ended day one. Day two started with the candidates' video exercise being shown to the appointment panel, and our receipt of the feedback, which I've already mentioned from the psychologists of the internal, external stakeholder panels. There then followed a presentation exercise. The sort of examination question given to the candidates is at 11.2 of my report, on page 146, and they were given 6 days to prepare the presentation. That presentation was to the appointment panel and was assessed by members of the panel. And finally, in terms of the process of testing out the suitability of the candidates, there came the interview, which, like the presentation exercise, was in front of all 4 members of the appointment panel. The questions asked by the appointment panel were designed to probe the responsibilities of the Chief Constable's role profile within the context of the key issues facing Nottinghamshire police and the challenges associated with the role. The same questions were asked of each candidate. Following each interview, the members of the appointment panel made their own notes and also wrote down rating scores for each answer given by the candidate. And only when that had occurred was there a discussion about the scoring for each aspect of the interview questions, and in that all members participated, and a moderated score was reached under each of those headings. At that point, Michelle Battery, as the Chief Executive, joined the discussion, as did a psychologist from the college. And as with every other part of this process, the College of Policing psychologist briefed the appointment panel on the proper process to be followed. So as a result of that process, the PCC, advised by the panel, reached a decision on his preferred candidate based on the candidate's scores for the interview and the results of the exercises completed on day one. So as to my conclusion of the process, I mean, I was satisfied that the PCC was committed, from all that I saw, to a rigorous assessment of the suitability of the candidates, and he was aiming to find the right candidate for the role of Chief Constable. And at each stage there was in-depth discussion between panel members, between us, of the evidence which we noted down and justification for the assessments which we came to before the final decisions on the scores were made. So I would say that the process fully met the principles of fairness and openness, and the identification of the successful candidate was based on merit. Chair, that's the summary of my report. Obviously, if members have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very full and comprehensive run around and run through all the things that you undertook during that key process. I'll just see if there's anyone who wishes to raise any questions. People have had the opportunity to read your full report as part of the pack before today. I don't sense that there's anyone who would wish to. Can I then, on behalf of everyone, I know you'll have had this from the Commissioner, but on behalf of the panel, can we thank you very much indeed for giving a very comprehensive account of quite a significant period of work that you've undertaken. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we can now refer to, sorry, did you wish? Yes. If you want to go off and do some gardening on this nice afternoon, please feel free to do. We'll envy you.
I won't disclose what I'm about to do, but if the Commissioner is also happy with my signing off, then thank you very much.
Yes, I am, Andrew, and thank you once again for all of your help, support, knowledge and experience. It's been most helpful. Thank you very much.
I was very glad to take part in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
That takes us back to taking things the plan we have at the moment. And I think, Commissioner, there's an opportunity to just say one or two words or one or two things, and I'm sure there's one or two members may want to follow that up. So perhaps we could hand over to you at this stage.
Absolutely. So I think it's important that I sort of give to you my thoughts and feelings about my proposed candidate and why I went down the path of selecting Steve Cooper as that preferred candidate, and why Steve Cooper is here today in front of you. So to answer that question, the first thing that I must sort of point you to is that Steve Cooper was the highest scoring candidate in the final interview, as you just heard, and the panel agreed unanimously with his evidence that he provided and the fact that he clearly has the ability to meet the required competencies and values which I set out. From previous experience in roles that I've done and where I came from, namely the NHS, values are really important to me, and values are important to the way that we deliver our service to our communities and how that reflects. And I wanted somebody that reflected my value set and reflected what I think are some of the challenges of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire and how we best move Nottinghamshire forward. And Steve clearly reflected that. Also, to make note as well, it's already been made by Andrew that in terms of the experience of the panel, Sir Andy Marsh is really probably the most experienced Chief Constable in the country. He comes with a wealth of knowledge and experience, and obviously he is the Chief Constable for the College of Policing, who set a lot of the standards and protocols for chief officers. So to have him on the panel and to have him there not only gave us confidence that we were going down the right path and we were looking at the right issues and the right challenges for Steve to overcome, but it really sort of like, if we were going offline, he would pull us back on. And he had great wealth of knowledge and experience. We also had Amy Harhoff, who is the Chief Executive for EMCA, again, wildly experienced and brought that to the fore in the selection of the candidate. And obviously Andrew, who you just met as the independent member, and myself. So in terms of the panel I felt was a really strong panel and put the challenges to the candidates to really eke out what it is that their value set is and their skill set is. With stakeholders, just bear in mind with the stakeholders, again, Andrew's already mentioned it, so just touching upon it. In terms of the internal stakeholders from organisations, Police and People Services, the GMB, Unison, the Black Police Association, Police Federation and the Police Superintendents Association were all had a conversation opportunity to question Steve Cooper and were in favour of Steve as a preferred candidate. And again, we did the external stakeholder, just to give you some idea of who that was. Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner Angela Condola, Chief Executive for Nottinghamshire County Council, the Strategic Director of Communities of Nottingham City Council, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, and the Youth Commission Chair and Member. So again, another strong panel that really challenged Steve in making sure that he is the candidate that suits Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. And you know, in Steve's favour as Deputy Chief Constable, he's already been performing the functions of Chief Constable, so he has an incredible understanding of Nottinghamshire Police. And he has also been played a large part in Operation Catalyst, which is the operation which was to lead us out of the engaged status under HMRC FRS. So Steve has a thorough understanding of why we were involved in Catalyst, but also has an understanding of how and why we got out and where we need to go in the future. So that came across really, really powerfully for me. Also, I believe that Steve's leadership is about being able to listen and being able to respond to that, you know, not being a dictator, but listening to the issues, listening to the problems and seeing how best we can respond and deliver the services that our communities need. And in terms of the culture of the force, which is really important to me, I think Steve understands the culture of the force. He understands perhaps some of the challenges that we have that need to be dealt with, and also supporting staff wellbeing, which is becoming more and more of a challenge for policing, not just in Nottinghamshire and Nottingham, but all over the country. And really, you know, looking at ways in which we can improve the diversity and inclusion of our workforce, which is really, really important to make sure that we're representative. So in conclusion, Steve Cooper is the preferred candidate because he excelled in a rigorous, transparent and merit-based selection process and demonstrated outstanding leadership and alignment with the force priorities. And he received strong support from both the assessment panel and independent oversight. So on that, I will hand over back to you, Chair, and if there's any other questions anybody would like to ask.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you. I think we have 1 or 2 questions to put to you. We'll start with Mrs. Hardy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I think the question that I was going to ask, you may have already answered, but if there is anything additional you'd like to add, I was going to ask if you could set out the reasons why Mr. Cooper was your preferred candidate, and you have explained that in great depth. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just to say that I have absolute full confidence in Steve Cooper as my preferred candidate, but hopefully as my ongoing Chief Constable. We are facing significant challenges, and I need a candidate that is capable of being able to deal with those challenges and still keep the force moving forward. What I don't want is slippage. So, you know, we've got a huge commitment on neighbourhood policing. We've got the white paper coming. You know, the government are throwing lots of different angles at us in terms of the challenges of policing. Not only that, our communities are forever demanding, and rightly so, for the best service we can possibly deliver to them. And it does take an exceptional candidate to be able to stand up and really give a plan to try and deliver some of this and get it over the line. So I'm confident, just to say that I'm really confident Steve is that candidate. And I hope today that if you've read the papers and when you get to ask Steve your questions, you'll see that come through.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Crime Commissioner. So, as Crime Commissioner, what do you see as the main priorities that are going to be set for the Chief Constable over the next 6 months?
So for me, my main priorities are we've made a huge commitment to neighbourhood policing. And I want to make sure that that gets delivered and is delivered, not just from a Chief Constable perspective, but from a government perspective. It's really important that we engage with our communities and have that conversation and are open to that conversation and open to some of the criticism that comes our way and looking at the best way in which to try and manage that and deal with the issues in hand. We've obviously come out of engaged status. We came out of engaged status within 12 months, which is generally unheard of. And that's testament to Steve as a Deputy Chief Constable and the work that he put into Operation Catalyst. What I do not want to see is HMIC coming back for another Peel report and us slipping back. I actually would like to see an outstanding force demonstrated, not only just for Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, but for the country. One of the things that is quite outstanding about Nottinghamshire is we are starting to put ourselves on the map for the things that we are doing really well, and the government are starting to use us as a yardstick on how things should be done, particularly in terms of our neighbourhood offer and the way that we deliver that to our community. So it's really important to me that slippage is one of the issues that I've got. I want a Chief Constable that's obviously visible and accessible to the community, and will drive the improvements in public trust and confidence. That's really important to me. Policing is under increased scrutiny, and I feel that we really need to stand up to that scrutiny, however challenging that becomes, because it is challenging. But on the other side of it as well, there's a sort of embracing, obviously, technology and innovation and digital transformation, and looking at the new approaches that we hopefully can start delivering to our communities by using technology and engaging with that to try and get better results. So I suppose in conclusion, I really expect in the first 6 months really to consolidate our recent improvements, to focus on our neighbourhood policing and community trust and strengthen partnerships, support the workforce and drive operational excellence and innovation, all in alignment with, of course, my policing plan.
Thank you. Well, that was just first ones.
That felt more than 5 objectives to achieve.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner, for giving the panel the assurance that you were satisfied that all the pre-employment issues that we've travelled through have now been solved.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think it's only right and proper now to welcome Mr. Cooper. I don't know whether you want to address the assembled crowd first and tell us a bit about yourself. We have got quite a lot of questions, some of which I'm sure you'll touch on and we may not need to ask, but welcome, and we look forward to hearing how you're going to provide Nottinghamshire with an outstanding Chief Constable.
Thank you, Chair. I'll aim to talk for 90 minutes to wind down the clock in that respect then. But we will, I'll give a very sort of brief introduction. I know most of you sort of around the table will know me from various different roles in the past. But so Steve Cooper, I joined the police almost 30 years ago in the Metropolitan Police Service. I worked there until the very tail end of 2001 when I joined Nottinghamshire Police, and have worked here ever since. So Nottinghamshire Police is definitely somewhere that I would consider to be my home, heavily invested in. I think the workforce are truly fantastic. I think that the attitude, delivery and problem-solving capabilities that we have are second to none, and I'm extremely proud to work here. In terms of my background, I would say probably 80 to 90% of it has been in uniform. So it's sort of very much neighbourhood policing, local policing at the heart of everything that I do. One of my first roles within Nottinghamshire Police was as what was then the local area commander, now the neighbourhood inspector for Mansfield. So that's where I definitely learned my sort of problem-solving skills, my partnership skills, and then I worked as a city chief inspector in neighbourhood before becoming one of the superintendents in the city of Nottingham. Whilst in the city, I commanded some of the larger events that took place. So those of you who remember the English Defence League and United Against Fascism demonstration that took place in December on the same day as our Leicester and Nottingham derby. Had the privilege of being the tactical commander for that. The Golden Jubilee, which took place in the city at the same time in 2012, as well as the Olympic torture relay. So some really big events, some really good operational areas, but mainly being part of the city command team and delivering what at the time was some of the sort of best partnership working that was seen across the country, and giving talks at some of the College of Policing and Excellence in Policing conferences around that partnership working. From the city, I became the divisional commander before going on to the strategic command course in 2017. That's a course that allows you to go become a chief sort of operating officer, so ACC. After completing that, became the local policing assistant chief constable for Nottinghamshire, where I stayed for 5 years, being the goal for the COVID pandemic, which seems an eternity ago in some respects and only sort of yesterday in others, but being the SCG chair for that, working across all the key partnerships across Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City, and really trying to embed our local policing and neighbourhood policing offer into that area. Saw some significant improvements during that time and some really good policing. In 2002, I became the Deputy Chief Constable, which is responsible for sort of the sort of operations and operating of the force, including professional standards, and including some of the governance arrangements, where I stayed until I was given the opportunity through unfortunate circumstances to become the Acting Chief Constable almost a year ago to the day. I think 1 week shy of it. So that is a very brief sort of background of my operational experience and a bit background of me. But just sort of finish off on a sort of a personal note. Married, 2 kids, who sort of still school age, so still school here. So really enjoy being part of the city and county. This is where we go out, it's where we have fun, it's where we sort of work and play all together. But really privileged to be in the position of being a preferred candidate, really privileged to be sat here today. And I'll say I look forward to your questions with a slight trepidation, but I look forward to answering your questions. So thank you.
Thank you for that brief synopsis. That's very helpful. Perhaps we can hand over to, first of all, Councillor Hall. Thank you for their question.
Hello, Mr. Cooper. Hello, Mr. Cooper. What do you think are the main policing issues in nationally, and how do these relate to Nottinghamshire?
I think a lot of the issues that are taking place nationally that affect policing take place in Nottinghamshire as well. So we have an annual documentation called the State of Policing that sort of His Majesty's Inspectorate completes, that highlights what they consider on a national scale to be some of the key issues. Locally, and as DEP was responsible for this documentation, we have the force management statement as well as some of our other control strategies. But the force management statement highlights what we believe through a series of metrics, professional judgment and other areas are what we think are the sort of issues that affect the people of Nottinghamshire as well as our staff themselves. A lot of alignment with them nationally and locally, so I'll talk at the same time about both, if that's okay. Trust and confidence, I think, is an absolute key issue. It's being affected against the public services in the state. Traditionally, policing still remains relatively high compared to a lot of other bodies, but it's still far too low. And it's an area where we keep seeing continual drops. I always think with trust and confidence, it can be affected to the detriment by something that happens locally and nationally. The only way we will build it back is through local interaction. We can't do a media release to build that trust and confidence. We can't rely on something happening in the national media to think, well, isn't the policing great? It relies on us really working well with local communities. So the neighbourhood policing offer is absolutely key to building back that trust and confidence. Having the visibility, the accessibility, the named officer through the neighbourhood policing guarantee is absolutely key. So I think that's where my sort of commitment goes through to neighbourhood policing. I've worked in it for pretty much, I know a lot of people say I've worked as a detective in every rank. I've worked in neighbourhood policing for pretty much every rank of my service. It means an absolute lot to me, and that sort of problem solving, local based working is how we build back trust and confidence. We will still do the positive media stories, we'll still do the work that we do with our areas, but it is around local people telling other local people about how good the services that they've received. So I think trust and confidence is absolutely key. I think violence against women and girls is absolutely up there. I mean, it's deemed to be a national, strategic national policing requirement. It definitely is in Nottinghamshire. We're doing some good work in terms of trying to improve the services that we offer and we deliver. We're doing some good work in terms of some of our investigation standards and our partners in the criminal justice system to operation what we call Soteria. But it is still something that is an absolute drastically underreported crime type, and certainly a crime type that doesn't get the detection rate that it should warrant. And it's something that affects 50% of the population. In terms of plans that we have to address that, we are looking to work with sort of the national teams, so the National Centre for Advanced Women and Girls, to look at who we can put into our control room to help support with those schools. We're doing something called RVR, which is actually around getting a secure digital evidence capture at first point of contact. So if somebody phones up, we don't rely on sending an officer, because even if it takes minutes or slightly longer to get around there, you lose that track. So to capture that evidence on video that first time is absolutely key. And where it's been piloted across the other parts of the country, it's worked really, really well. Demand, complexity and capacity is another significant risk. Demand, it has gone up, but it hasn't gone up significantly. But the complexity of the demand that we now face has. 90% of the crimes that we deal with have a digital footprint. When I joined, that was not the case. I think I had a mobile phone when I first joined policing, but I think I was allowed 15 minutes talk time. I couldn't connect to the internet and I could send 10 texts. It's just different now. Everywhere we see there's CCTV cameras, doorbell footage. People with mobile phones have more data than sort of the first spaceship that went up, and it's absolutely incredible. So I think how we work to try and streamline our processes at the front end to actually triage as best we possibly can to get that early evidence capture is sort of key, but making sure that we're fighting effectively that increasing complexity of demand, if not increasing demand. I think, and the Commissioner mentioned it, the well-being of our workforce. Nationally, policing is sort of, I'll say, overrepresented with people with less than 5 years service. At one point, we're sort of slightly below this now, but at our peak, we had over 40% of our staff with under 5 years service, which is incredible. That's not to say that they're not working hard, it's not to say they're not delivering a great service, but the experience that has previously been in policing is no longer there. So it's how we try and work that through. There's lots of surveys that take place in relation to people feeling fatigued, people feeling tired, and it's how we do that wellbeing offer. We've got a great offer within Nottinghamshire Police. So we have wellbeing ambassadors, wellbeing champions, and a separate wellbeing team where we look at how we can try and make the job. My job is to make their role as easy as I possibly can, so they can go out there and deliver a service as best they can. So that's one of the key issues. And then probably my last bit, because I don't want to spend all my time talking about this, is in relation to the sort of serious organised crime and some of the work that around that sort of whole digital and cyberspace. Crimes used to be fairly localised. That's not the case anymore. There's an awful lot of either hidden crime that takes place on the internet, or certainly crime that is not so easily available to people. It causes a lot of significant harm to children and young people and vulnerable people. It is being exploited by people all across the world. The detection routes that we take are far more complicated than they should be. But the way that we can do it, if we can't enforce our way out of that due to all sorts of different international treaties, we can look to protect people. So we've invested in protective repair officers who go out and deal with people who are vulnerable to cyber abuse and actually try and put some sort of safeguards in place there. But I think they're probably the issues which largely mirror the state of policing and certainly have sort of catered for in our force management statement. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you for the comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very fulsome. And before passing on to my next colleague, just a bit of clarity. You quickly mentioned the national directorate, or whatever the phrase was, and you said you developed a locally force management statement.
Yeah, well, the state of the HMIC FRS complete a state of policing documentation that looks at what the risks, threats, and opportunities are for policing across England and Wales.
My subsequent question about this is this just something that's held within the force, or is this something that's issued to partners, for example?
It's publicly. There's versions of it publicly available. It goes into, we submit it every year to the HMIC. They will then use it to pass some of their documentation and use it to obviously then self-assess ourselves. But there are redacted versions of it available online.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. Thank you. Can I ask Mayor Abrahams now? Thank you.
Yeah, well, firstly, I've got a lot of confidence to find out that you did cut your teeth with problem solving in Mansfield. So I think there's quite a few challenges that come from that right at the start of your career that I'm sure you've taken forward throughout the rest of it. I've been on the police and crime panel for a number of years now, and the part about trust and confidence, open and transparent, I think we all perhaps might have been shocked when we kind of ended up, in a monitoring status. I don't think we saw it coming in any way whatsoever. So I think it's really important that it's that relationship with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable, that it comes across to the panel, the ups and downs of unexpected things which you've laid out. We want to make sure that we feel a part of that. So in relation to that, the actual question is moving forward as the new Chief Constable, what thought have you given to maintaining your operational independence as well as developing this relationship with the PCC? So like in particular, I think the panel feels they would welcome if the Chief Constable attended the PCC meeting to help build that relationship and better understanding going forward.
Okay, thank you. I'll sort of try and cover both bits of this sort of in tandem, but in terms of sort of that, the operational independence piece in relation to obviously the work of the Chief Constable and the PCC. Honestly, that's relatively straightforward. You know, it's clearly set out in law. It's clearly set out in the policing protocol around. Obviously, I'm responsible for the operational deployment and operational decisions of my staff, but I obviously play due cognizance to the police and crime plan in forming those decision making. In terms of how that works in practice, which is probably getting onto the question, the good news is I've had probably a year of practice with that. Before that, I was sort of responsible along with the chief exec for doing a lot of the work on the new governance framework around how we work together as a OPCC and a force perspective to make sure that that's aligned. And then sort of linking to that, the no surprises and certainly not getting caught out piece. We have built sort of an open, honest, challenging relationship whereby there are no surprises. Being put into engaged, and I'll be very, very, as an honest, was a surprise to Nottinghamshire Police. It was a surprise to people within Police and Crime. I think we've been very, upfront about that. We did get out of it quickly, as the Commissioner said, but we also got out of it as a better force. So we are now in a better position than we have been before. One thing I think that it did teach us was around looking for the small warning flags, they could be, but also looking about how we record our decision-making, our evidence base, to make sure that there are no surprises. So when HMIC come back in again, which will be starting pretty much this summer, but for a year's worth of sort of field work finalising in sort of June 27, we'll make sure that we don't go back into that engaged status. We work far better now with HMIC, far better with our peers at the College of Policing. The HMIC field team who come and visit us, on a frequent basis, they'll meet with me. We'll have very warts and all conversations around how we're getting on, but they also meet with the Commissioner's office and obviously have that discussion. So we meet frequently. There's an accountability board that takes place, which, obviously people have been cited to. We have the 6 monthly, which I think works really well. I'll call it informal gathering of the police and crime panel, usually at headquarters, where we can obviously, have that sort of themed-based discussion to actually get down to those sort of difficult questions around, is it as good as you say, or actually is that a significant risk as you're actually posing it to be? But one thing I'll give you my word of is that there are no surprises. I see working with the police and crime panels, working with the police and crime commissioner in the office. Is something that isn't done in isolation. It's actually working together to make sure that there are no surprises. Trust and confidence can't be built by working in isolation. It needs to be done as a sort of tripartite agreement. And hopefully, with that sort of joint working, that joint respect, that joint openness and engagement, along with the improved governance and scrutiny that we have through all of our different forums, that will stop that happening again.
So, thank you for that. Does that mean that you will attend the police and crime panel? Does that mean you will be attending?
When I say I don't know yet, I mean, at the moment, the sort of obviously the governance arrangements are that, I can, come up invited and requested the chair and obviously the commissioner. I think that certainly what I found from the year I've been doing it, the meetings that we have on a 6-monthly basis where we can all get around and have a proper conversation, I think that is equally to me as useful as coming to the more formal police and crime panel basis. But again, I'll obviously be open to those conversations outside.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitmore. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cooper.
Afternoon.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you, and you.
As Chief Constable, you will have responsibility for operational policing, but how will you seek to consult key partners around operational activity? And how will you manage these partners' expectations and demands?
Okay, I think I've alluded to probably some of those answers earlier on, where policing cannot be done in isolation. It is far too complicated. The issues that we face now are so cross-cutting with local authority partners, with our health partners, and with our sort of third sector partners. It definitely cannot be done in isolation. In terms of how we work well together as a sort of while maintaining some of our operational independence. Clearly, operational sort of policing rests with me. And so, that's obviously clear. But to have shared outcomes, shared visions with our key partners is absolutely key. So working with whether it's the local authorities, again with our health partners, to understand the roles and responsibility that each of us have, to make sure there are no surprises, to make sure that there are no areas where we are fighting against each other, and to understand who is responsible for what and when. So we call it a command protocol in policing, an agreement in sort of more simple terms, to make sure that we can actually sort of get that shared situational awareness. When we have a difference of opinion, which is understandable and does happen at times, is giving that explanation and rationale as to why it isn't a priority for policing or why it's not a priority for the partnership. There's sort of a sentence that I have that, if we can't explain why we're doing something, then we probably need to get back and revisit the decision not to do it or to do it. So it's really getting that understanding of who's best to lead the partnership, who's best to work in that area together, and how we can get a shared vision. Certainly my experience of working both in the city but also in the county as the ACC for local policing, we work really well as a partnership. When we were going through periods of austerity, we sort of had a mantra of we're going to shrink together. We now have a far better understanding in terms of our partnership working around our public protection space, about dealing with vulnerable children and adults. And I think that shared sort of understanding, that shared activity really does help us sort of work well together for the best outcomes of the citizens, because it's not about what's best for Nottinghamshire Police or even what's best for the city or county council or health. It's about what's best for the people out there. So I work really well with our partnership to make sure that we deliver that service, but also we understand what our roles and responsibilities are, because often police aren't best placed to deal with an issue, or likewise the local authorities aren't. It's about how we work together to deal with that.
I can come back.
Yes.
There seems to be been a problem with force in public trust. I'm saying that because I've got all the reports down here, and about 50% of the population at the moment agree that police are doing a good job, and so forth. How are you going to improve that matters? Is there a way forward? And how will you get the general public to report more of the issues, more of the crime that's taking place at the moment? A real serious problem. I wonder how you're going to combat those two issues.
Well, the issue of trust and confidence comes back to sort of my absolute commitment to neighbourhood policing. About 50% think policing is doing a good job. There's a much smaller percentage who think we're not doing a good job, and there's a fair big chunk in the middle who are probably neutral or undecided. It's the sort of certainly the neutral undecided where we need to really get that sort of focus in, and it's about doing that through showing people that we're accessible, we're visible, we're working in the local communities and making a real difference. We have a bit of a campaign of You Said We Did. So we have quarterly meetings which set the priorities with local councillors, local community leaders about people's issues in their local area. and then we make sure we keep people updated around what we're doing. If it hasn't worked, we're dead honest and say that it hasn't worked, and we try and look for other reasons why. But to build that trust and confidence needs to be about showing real significant improvements to our communities. And where they've got a complaint or where they've got an issue, they can come forward and raise it with the, with the local area, commander of the neighbourhood police inspector, and the neighbourhood police teams. All of our staff now, so not just neighbourhoods, but all of our staff response and CID have been taught and trained in problem solving. So it's all around not just dealing with what's in front of them, but trying to solve the problem in the long term. That, along with our partnership working through our neighbourhood teams, we'll start seeing a real difference in how people sort of experience the quality of life issues, what tend to be the issues that affect trust and confidence. As I said right at the beginning, trust and confidence can be really damaged by things that happen on a national or international scale. It can only be rebuilt back by that face-to-face contact of our local teams being out in their local communities and being seen to do the jobs that people are asking them to do. So dealing with what really matters to the local communities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to invite Councillor Jenkins, because I know that was also one of your topics, wasn't it? So I just want to give her the opportunity to see if there's anything further she wants to raise.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Hi.
Hello.
All right. Yeah. Just to pick up on that and broaden it out for me more than anything else. I've heard what you said about trust and confidence. I've heard what you said about local interactions, local people being able to pass on their experiences, which then sort of builds a reputational element of it, and about crime being underrepresented. So what I'd like to explore more with you is how will you make the local communities feel that they're involved in policing to combat or address those issues, and what are the KPIs you would use to give you a sense of feeling that it's going in the right direction?
I think if I start with the KPIs and then say how we're going to get there first. So through the CCC's office, there's the confidence survey that takes place. We have the British Crime Survey as well, but that's far more sort of a county-wide level rather than breaking it down into a ward-based area. So Dan and the team give us a good indication through a very statistically significant survey as to do people feel safe? Sometimes do they feel confident in policing? But equally as importantly, have they had contact with the police? So what we tend to see is once people have had contact with the police, their confidence in us goes up. It's the people who haven't had contact where actually they're thinking, don't trust you or they're not confident in you, and that's where it remains either low or deteriorating. So we're trying to work out then where we sort of target our activity the best way. To get people engaged, I think the key thing is we're looking at sort of the physical space in terms of going into the local areas through local councillors, through local sort of ward-based working to get people's views and opinions. That's often through the councillors themselves, like myself, or it's through going into our some of our neighbourhood sort of patchwork and patch walks that we do to actually get the ideas from there. We then set the priorities, which can be influenced by people feeding in through our surveys, and our social media presence and platform is now growing significantly. Whereas before, I think we're probably, I'll say very modern and current, but my kids would tell me very old-fashioned. We're now making sure that we go out into far more diverse ways of getting people to start engaging with us. So the ease of contacting and communicating with Nottinghamshire Police in terms of engagement and feedback is much, much easier. So we'll keep making sure that that still delivers. A lot of the other parts of it as well is getting the voices of what we do that is good back out to the communities. So the sort of independent scrutiny that we have around areas that affect community trust and confidence, so hate crime, stop and search, use of force, those independent scrutiny panels that are truly independent and can scrutinise any issues and any jobs that they like. When that gets reported back out, it hopefully gives people that trust and confidence that we are there to change. We are there to make differences and improve, because I'm not complacent. I think as a Nottinghamshire Police, I genuinely think is a fantastic place to work, but do we make mistakes? Absolutely. Do we get things wrong? Absolutely. But are we looking to improve and explain how we can do that? Absolutely. So I think it's that transparency, making sure our workforce understand the value of being out there with the communities, understand that the sort of the scenes of crime mantra that we have, that every contact leaves a trace, is absolutely true when it comes to personal contact. If you speak to a police officer and you get brushed off, you get a bad service, you'll go back and tell any number of your friends and post it. if you get a good service, probably tell a few less, but actually it's around making sure that every time you have a contact with somebody, you come across professional, courteous and centred on what they need. So that's our training mantra now, is around training our neighbourhood officers, training our response officers about being victim-centred, public-focused, and that will then change that culture into one that is truly around delivering a good service to the communities of Nottinghamshire. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 or 3 more, just hang on for a bit longer.
Running out of water.
Mrs. Harding, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cooper.
I'm going to get one.
In view of the ongoing pressures faced by the wider criminal justice system, how will you be able to influence improvements in Nottinghamshire? I know you touched on the digital aspect of police work, so I'm hoping that is going to be part of your answer.
So do I now. Yes, thank you. But no, thank you. I mean, the pressures under the criminal justice system, I think, sort of probably stretch across a whole range of factors. So you've got the backlogs taking place in the courts at the moment. You have significant vacancies rate in the probation service when it comes to that sort of post-sentence rehabilitation work. You've obviously got the sort of capacity issues and short turnaround sentences taking place, the independent sentencing review, as well as the sort of increasing complexity that's taking place within the court system. Thank you so much. So in terms of certainly focusing on some of that technological side of it, we are investing heavily in how we can turn around a lot of the digital media devices that we have far quicker than we would traditionally have taken place. So we did some work, and this is probably going back a few years, and you probably remember the some of the high-profile cases where we were taking victims, or not we, but policing UK-wise was taking victims' phones with them for a period of months whilst it being downloaded. Well, we now have a situation whereby we aim to, and we're well into the high 90% of this, aim to get, if we seize a victim's phone, and it's only when it's absolutely necessary that we do, that's returned to them within 24 hours, and we're compliant with that. We're triaging a lot more evidence using sort of artificial intelligence-based platforms. So it's not a human going through and sifting through the data. If you download an iPhone now, made it into a book, it probably touched the ceiling many, many times over. So it's a case of how do we use our sort of technology to filter that. So our DigiDesks that we have, which we've sort of invested significantly heavily in, have that availability to try and work out how we can speed that process up, only take out the necessary information, and only prosecute those offences that will actually then add value. So we're not looking to prosecute every offence that we find on a digital device. We're only looking for the ones working with the CPS in partnership that allows us to get that secure convictions, and then we'll not enhance the sentence if we go and find more of the same. In terms of other technology that we're using to speed up that backlog, we invested 18 months ago in automatic redaction software. So redaction, for those people who don't obviously work within the criminal justice system, every time we submit a file to either the CPS for advice or later on to the Crown Court or Magistrates Court, we have to redact, so put black pens through lots of that information. We purchased some software that takes the average crime redaction of a Crown Court file from about 7 hours to 17 minutes. That frees up that officer's time. Just for reassurance, we tested it against using the redaction software, using some really experienced detectives. And it's not been critical of the experienced detectives, the software was far better because it just looks for the key patterns of words, and it's used across the country now, so we've invested in that. But in terms of how we're also looking to improve that area, it's about getting things right first time. So a lot of the times that backlogs happen and sort of delays to justice can take place is because we will submit a file, it won't be quite right, so it comes back. We then resubmit a file, it's still not quite right, it comes back. And if people stick to their statutory maximum time limits, which I hope they wouldn't, they get it done quickly, that could be 3 months down the line just for a couple of errors. So we are working really closely now with improving the training our staff have in terms of actually completing a file to good quality, but we're also introducing gatekeepers into that role. So we've got a team based at our sort of criminal justice hub in the north of the county, where they will go through these files and start finding errors, correcting them as soon as they can, feeding that back to the officers and having that delivered in a much better way. So our working with the sort of the CPS and our sort of criminal justice partners wider, our sort of guilty pleas are some of the highest that you'll get in the country. Our timeliness is now probably one of the best that you get in the region, but I'm no way complacent, because we can be so much better than we are by getting some of the stuff, just those sort of continuous improvement, marginal gains, we can improve sort of even more significantly, but that's how I hope to do it. In terms of widening it out, I also, which I probably should have mentioned on my introduction, I have the privilege of being the National Police Duty Council lead for integrated offender management and electronic monitoring. That means I get a seat at the table on the National Criminal Justice Board and the National Prevention Board. The influence that allows us to do to try new things, to become a pilot force, to work with some of our other colleagues in the wider CJ sector to deliver better services to the public. It just gives us that sort of advantage over others by having that sort of seat at the table. So it's a bit of extra work, but it pays dividends when it comes to the influence we bring back into Nottinghamshire.
Thank you. I look forward to a brighter future.
Plenty of optimists in the room. Mary Abrahams, thank you.
Yeah, I think you've dealt with some of this previously, but just to kind of maybe drill down a little bit. So based on your experience of Operation Catalyst, what further improvements do you feel will help the force to make sure that we're not placed in engaged status in the future? So I'm thinking about the things that we're monitoring that were highlighted there, and I'm going to combine two of them: improved investigations standards, and you've touched on it before, strengthening neighbourhood policing. But the reason I'm sort of drilling down on it a bit more, it's the information that comes to the panel that gives us the assurance that we're kind of monitoring. Oh, it's the data that we receive that actually shows that we are making that progress. So kind of fitting it into things like you said about, digital footprint and things like this, about how early evidence capture then makes, the processing of crime a lot quicker. You get lots of, I would say lots of, but there are stories where little corner shops have CCTV that's captured the person, where you can see the face and everything, and then the kind of goes nowhere to say, oh, we've given this information to the police. So it's coming back to those 4 criteria that we're monitoring on Operation Catalyst. How are we going to get that information and data through to the panel that we can actually feel confident that we're making progress?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I think what Catalyst showed, I think, is that with the right mindset, the right sort of combined energy of the force, we can recover and improve rapidly. So we came out of engagement within the year, as the Commissioner said, which I think is pretty much record time. And we were showing sort of almost immediate sort of recovery from very, very early on by working with our key partners with HMIC, but also within some of the leading forces in the country. In terms of how can we make sure that it doesn't happen again, I think, this is my fault. Before, we used to focus on sort of outcomes rather than process. So we had some of the sort of best 999 answering times in the country. We had probably one of the positive outcome rates, certainly in the top quartile in the country. But that middle bit of the investigations, we weren't using case management effectively. So could I give you assurance that we were keeping victim updated? No. Could I have given you assurance that supervisors were properly investigating those crimes? No. We think they were. We were training them to do that, but we didn't have that process in place to actually make sure that that was taking place. So now we've got a totally different performance framework that we look at. It's aligned to both our control strategy, so what the priorities are we have as a force, but also to what we call the PEEL framework. So the 10 questions that HMIC will come in and ask every year, or every 2 years, will allow us to, I'll probably just take it back a little bit. HMIC are really helpful. They give you the questions they're going to ask, and they give you basically what good looks like attached to it. So we've got an action plan that now looks at each of those different themed areas in depth. So we do two of those every month. We'll go through and self-assess, and then we'll ask a peer to come in and assess us to make sure that we're sort of fit for purpose. When you take that into the investigation cycle, what that's meant is every day on our performance dashboard, our dials, so anyone can go in and look at it and sort of see it on our computer. It now tells us of all of our crimes that we have open, how many of those have had a victim update within the last 28 days? How many of those have had a supervisory plan done within the last 28 days? And how many of those have had an investigation plan update in the last 28 days? That is consistently now above 95%. We've chosen 95% as a bit of a target because we think there's always people who are either on annual leave, holiday, miss it by a day. But I can look down and say, what is the oldest one that we have? And it can just, at a touch of fingertips, bring up those key areas. In terms of then assessing the quality, we have something called QUAT, which I now wish I'd remember what the acronym stands for, but it is around the quality audit, and I can't remember the two T's, but it's around just making sure that the actual supervisors go in. So it's an inspector or above will go into another team's files and say, right, I'm going to have a look at your crime types and actually make sure that they're being investigated to the suitable standard of victim quality and care. That takes place all the time. We were sort of, it's measured out to 5. We're hitting about 3.8 at the minute, which in terms of national score for other forces who do QUAT, is probably slightly higher than average, but we're not complacent again, because that means that there's still a chunk where things aren't being recorded to the quality that we would like, even when the victim update had taken place. It's not what we would expect to sort of happen. In terms of then the investigation areas, we've developed a whole sort of training on what we call bite-sized chunks. So it goes out to like sort of 5-minute videos to our staff, but every single sort of annual training cycle fits in with this investigation and professionalising investigations. That's seeing us sort of at the moment still having sort of top quartile outcomes for sort of crimes. Again, still far more that we could do, should do, but really good investigation rates. When it comes to use of technology, we've again invested recently in abilities to start having digital transfers coming in from members of the public, but also from shops that can send us their footage evidentially into us without having to print off a disc or do whatever. We can just capture it. That then gets put into our sort of triaging team, who can do facial recognition on the Police National Database on any image that you have. So if there's an image that we have on CCTV, if there's an image that we have on someone's taken on their phone, that can be put into a nationally available PND, which will map their face. Again, it's not foolproof, it's not brilliant, but it's enough to go, there's a good start for 10. We're also looking as we go forward into more lifetime facial recognition, but that's something that we're working on with the national team around how we can get that deployed across the whole country, let alone just in Nottinghamshire. So there is that opportunity to now try and work better with some of our retailers, make it easier for them, because they hate it when we turn up and I'll say, can you print it off to us, can you put it onto a disc, can you do this? As long as they've got a relatively new system and they can be internet enabled, they can come over to us evidentially. So we are doing some good work around trying to solve those issues. That probably takes it back into some of our other work around neighbourhoods, where the actual cause for concern was around, it probably comes back to our thing around outcomes and not doing the process bit right. We didn't have an abstraction policy. So we now have a very detailed abstraction policy. We have a mechanism that all of our staff on neighbourhoods can press a button and detail why they've been abstracted from their core duties. The abstraction rates are obviously then recorded, so they're shown by officer, by team, by area, to look at who we are abstracting and what reason. We still abstract more than we would like. Ideally, we'd have no abstractions, but I think, as you've probably seen last weekend, when we have a big European policing match, and we're sort of bringing in people from other countries, bringing in forces from other areas of the country, we need to use all of our available resources, whether that's for football from neighbourhoods, or whether that is putting our response cops into policing if they've got the right skills. And then, because answering 999 calls is still the absolute #1 priority for anyone who's ever dialed 999, they'll understand that, we'll then backfill with response. So we're not perfect, but it's better, and we understand it now. So we can say, why are we always abstracting officers from Ashfield on a Wednesday? We can now dig in and have a look, which we couldn't do before. So we're in a good place. HMIC have come in and done sort of unofficial sort of re-inspections as well as to get us out of Catalyst. They are very glowing about a lot of the work that we're undertaking now. We wouldn't be if they came in to do a re-inspection now, they're absolutely confident that we would not be engaged. We'd definitely be on that journey through to good and ultimately into being an outstanding force. But like I said, we're not complacent. There's still more we can do, and not going back into engaged is not my vision or my aim. It is definitely to move far away from that end up to the outstanding bit.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really informative and detailed.
Yeah.
And if that information then presents itself, I always like to say in a, not in an idiot's guide, but in plain language when it comes through to referring to that data. Because how you mentioned it there, that'd be really good to, you know, for us to be able to follow that progress. But the process you've mentioned sound excellent.
Thank you. I've got two or three more. Councillor Inglis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, super. I was going to ask you about welfare and officers. You covered that with the wellbeing ambassadors. So perhaps just go a little bit deeper focus on that with concerning data about police and staff suicides nationally. I know 22 to 25, there was over 170 of them being serving officers and 200 plus known attempts. You know, whether that's down to workload demand, criminal investigations or misconduct, that's down to that individual case. But really, what can you put in place to ensure that Notts Police is not maintaining those sort of figures and the staff is looked after? Because obviously, an ambassador would probably not engage in someone who wants to do that.
Yeah, one thing that we've only done last month, just to give sort of an update, and it feeds into that national picture, is we've signed a memorandum of understanding with, it's called Oscar Kilo, but OK, so it's about it's OK not to be OK. It's the national charity run by Andy Rhodes, who's a former Chief Constable, that looks at staff wellbeing and how we can improve the sort of services that we offer to staff. We've signed an MOU with them in relation to feeding them information that we have suitably anonymised in relation to staff who have either we suspect of committing suicide, because obviously that's a rule that only the coroner can give, either attempted or have said that they've got feelings of it through occupational health units. So we can try and get a picture across the whole of the UK, but more importantly, just Nottinghamshire about where our staff feel that that's an option. We have had too many suicides within Nottinghamshire Police over the years. It is something that we're very, very aware of. The options and the offer that we now have through both our, so to give you an idea, we have now a dedicated wellbeing team where those staff are available to deploy at a moment's notice into areas where we had only a death 2 or 3 weeks ago now of a serving officer. So they deploy into that area to help the colleagues and the peers of that person to actually sort of recover, get better and be trauma informed. We have trauma informed policing or TRIM that deploys. So if anyone goes to something that is either significantly traumatic, for example, a child death, or they go to a domestic horrendous traffic accident, we can deploy our TRIM team that will obviously provide them with that support. And in addition to that, we now have 24-hour availability to counsellors online. So through our new sort of EAP provider, we make sure that they have access to that, which is either available through video conferencing to that individual or through phones. In terms of making sure that we spot signs of areas, we have a sort of a wellbeing dashboard that looks at teams. And what it looks at is things like absence rates, grievances, unexplained or long-term sickness, highlighting the sickness areas, which again relies on people's honesty, and people sometimes don't want to put down stress and anxiety, they'll put down pull them back. But we try and work out so the overarching sickness and look at where we've got pockets of areas. We can then deploy in either the wellbeing team in that area or occupational health unit to try and look at what the underlying issue is. So sometimes we then marry that against teams' work rate, so number of crimes those people have, and again, not a foolproof guide, because 10 shoplifters versus 2 serious sexual offences is probably you can't compare, but it gives enough of an indication as to that person actually starting to show sort of signs of stress, anxiety, and we can start to intervene. All of our line managers now get sort of difficult conversation training around some of those areas that they need to start to discuss with staff. So it's that opportunity for people to speak to them. We've also teamed up with Derbyshire, so if people don't want to talk to anyone in their own force, they can actually hop over to a Derbyshire team, and likewise Derbyshire can come into us. I can't give you stats on whether that works or not for obvious reasons, I've no idea, but it's an offer that's there. But so a lot of good work. I mean, the policing is a stressful, as you'll know, a stressful, difficult, challenging job where people see things frequently that most people never see in a lifetime. I think there's a stat that most people go through some sort of high impact trauma events probably 3 times in their life. An officer will probably do about 300 times in their service. So it is something that we're consciously aware of. The work of Oscar Kilo, which is now sort of funded through National Police Council, they are we firmly follow their suicide prevention guide. We do our absolute best to make sure that our staff are safe, feel supported, and have avenues to turn to. But it really is relying on some of the work that Oscar Kilo do at the national stage to bring into that support specialist-wise for our colleagues, because we all found previously is people don't want to put their hand up and say, I need help, so we've got to go and find them.
Yeah, very comprehensive. Just picking up on that, I know the other bit of it was sort of these investigations against officers, especially with the IPCC, where they're sort of extracted for long periods of time before they're actually concluded. The officers left in suspension for a couple of years. What can be done about that?
Yeah, I mean, we make sure now that wherever an officer is suspended, they've now got a welfare contact. We make sure that person's fully briefed on all the different welfare aspects of it. We prioritise, and I'll talk for Nottinghamshire Police, and I can't talk for the IPC sadly, but we prioritise if somebody is suspended, that's a priority case to be put through as quickly as we possibly can. Regardless of outcomes, we've got to remember that suspension doesn't mean guilt, it just means that person's suspended. So we'll make sure that we hurry up that investigation wherever possible. But it is that welfare link, which before used to be, well, ask your supervisor to look for once a month. It's now a proper welfare trained officer who can be deployed. Being under investigation is a horrible thing because it starts sinking in this question of your honesty, integrity, your operational competence. But it's also that area of this could be career defining. So we just make sure that we do put that support in around individuals, because it's not a nice place to be, but it is one of those areas where investigating officers where there's allegations of evidence is part of being a police officer, and is part of our transparency around how we, show the public that we are not beyond reproach. So we do make sure that we honour the investigation process and the independence of it, but we do a lot of support around officers.
Thank you.
Last two, we're nearly there. Let the dog in first, thank you.
I think it's fair to say that the Commissioner and the panel are passionate about neighbourhood policing. Can you affirm your commitment to head of the neighbourhood policing? And in particular, are you committed to fill current vacancies in neighbourhood policing? And you talked about extraction. But is there a case for ring fencing these posts? What would be the impact if you ring fence neighbourhood policing posts?
I'll start with you first. But first, can I affirm my commitment to it? Yes, absolutely. In terms of ring fencing staff, we are doing a lot of work at the minute to make sure, or sorry, the other way, to fill the vacancies. We're doing a lot of work. So we understand that there will always be vacancies in every team we have, but neighbourhood policing is probably an area whereby there are more vacancies than I would like at the moment. We need to invest in it and make sure that the gaps are filled wherever possible, because actually it's around that long-term problem solving and preventing crime from taking place, rather than putting more cops into response to go and deal with it. So it's a bit of a leap of faith of put it in at the front end, and we should hopefully stop the demand coming out the other end in a year or so's time. So absolutely, we are looking to fill those vacancies. One of the tasks that our head of people services got through the strategic workforce plan that we have is to look at how we can sort of fill up all the bathtubs that we've got around the areas and get neighbourhood policing up to that absolute level. It will never be, and again, I hate saying it with numbers, it sort of logically can't be 100% full, because we will always have people who are long-term sick, people on maternity, and people who have just sort of actually quickly gone off to do another job or retired or resigned, and we're then obviously doing that backfill. But it should be that we keep them to a minimum, and we keep them sort of as equal as we can across the board, which I know is not always the case at the minute, and we're trying to work out how we can try and speed up our backfilling process. In terms of could we ring fence them, the commitment that sort of, I'll give is they are ring fenced wherever it is operationally possible. We have in Nottinghamshire Police, and it's partly thanks to the sort of precept agreement that took place through this room previously, we've got, I think, the second highest number as a percentage of officers deployed to neighbourhood policing. So we're about 13%, the national average is around 6. You could probably ring fence them if you had a much smaller percentage and say, we're never going to touch you, but we're going to have this other body of people. But that doesn't work with the model that I want to try and have. I want to have a significant number of neighbourhood officers so we can still deploy our 7-day-a-week pattern, which we do now, which, believe it or not, we haven't always been able to do. We always have a team who are working mornings and afternoons and into the evenings across all of our areas. And that means that, you know, because you've got an issue on a Tuesday afternoon, you've got to wait 3 weeks because that's when our shift pattern allows us to deal with it. That's absolutely mad. And so by having this number that we have now allows us to deploy with a inspector, 3 sergeants and a number of PCs on the area with PCSOs on that 7-day pattern. If I was to truly ring fence, as in say, you're never doing any other work ever again, I would then have to look at where I secure other resources to do things like sudden protest, policing that's taking place on a Thursday evening that we had only a couple while ago. And that would mean taking it away predominantly from our response teams. We use other people all the time, such as TSG and our roads policing team, but our response teams, which would then limit my ability to answer 999 calls quickly. So I'm always trying to do that balance of how do I make sure. But what I don't do and won't do is strip out a whole neighbourhood team to deal with a football match. We always make sure there's a football veteran in the area to deal with it. Could it be better? Yes, it could. Will it be better? Yes, it will. And you know, we'll get fairly close to our sort of key numbers in the very near future. There will always be a slight wobble because people will always be leaving, rejoining, but we'll be up there, and it will be far more sort of evenly spread across the whole workforce. The downside of neighbourhood policing is our best costs go into neighbourhood policing, and they become even better. And then they want to go and do specialist things, or specialists want them to come and do their work for them. And so, you know, we tend to get people who are there for the long haul. Like sort of some people I know have been in there for like 20 plus years. But you get people who have been deployed and think, I've got a whole load of new skills I didn't realise I had, and I want to go and try something new and exciting out. So it's that balance of how do we keep making sure that we've got a mixture of the absolute embedded neighbourhood officers and then still encourage those younger officers to join, get the skills, get the experience, get the grounding in neighbourhoods, and then go off and do whatever they want to do, but they've actually become problem solvers in that meantime and put it back into policing. So it'll get better, it'll be far more consistent, but I'd love to promise that I would ring fence them entirely, but I'd be probably telling you a mystery. So I can't hope to have any assurance that we only use more operationally necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew it was going too well. It's your fault for giving them too much information. I've got Councillor Wilmot and Councillor Richardson both want to come in on the conversation you've just been having.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, neighbourhood policing is one of my, shall we say, strong objections to how it's been delivered at this present time, sorry to say. When I talk to people in my constituency, which is every day, and I would say 100 people a week at least, their main concern is neighbourhood policing, and as their priorities, and tackling antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, drug issues, e-scooters, off-road bikes are essential issues to be addressed as far as our people are concerned. Are these issues among your priorities? And if they are, how are you going to tackle them? We all have to remember that if the perpetrator gets away with petty crime, very often what does that lead to? Further crime, more serious crime, so forth. And the other question on neighbourhoods is about surgeries. You have been doing a number of surgeries with the council in my area, but they've been in shops, they've been in community centres, they've been in libraries. And what happens? Nobody comes in, or hardly anyone comes in to see it. These surgeries have to be set in areas where the crime is taking place. We've got gazebos, I know you've got gazebos, and to set up a gazebo in an area where the crime is worse, the perpetrators don't like that at all. And very often it stops them, not stops them from doing it, but it moves them on somewhere else on a situation. I just wondered if you would, and it does help to deter crime, you know, having gazebos up in an area where crime is taking place. I just wondered if you got any thoughts on that.
Okay, in terms of the, do we understand local priorities? I would say hopefully we do. They're published on our website for each individual area, the top 3 priorities that we update quarterly, and that's influenced by public and by local councillors. So I would hope that they are mirror. We choose 3 because it's that area that we can do most with the most directed work on. But that's not to say that we then ignore the things that are 4, 5, and 6. You know, then we still deal with those issues. So when you look at things like e-scooters and electronic bikes, for example, and give an example, we sort of through the Commissioner's office, we've got sort of 2 bits of kit that we can deploy across the force to actually seize these bikes where we've never had the power to before. So there only allowed to be a certain power outage on these bikes, whereas before we'd have to look at the bike and go, is it, isn't it, can it, can't it? We don't have a clue. Now, device about that big, we can put the bike on it, immediately find out what power outage it has, seize it, report the person, and whether that's a prosecution or not is relatively incidental. It takes a bike that's worth probably several £1,000 off the street and puts it into a Russia. So that works. We're also doing work around immediate justice, again in partnership with the Commissioner's office, that starts to look at some of the, I'll call it lower level offending. That's not to say it's less serious, but lower level offending, whereby you don't use people before the magistrate's court. We use sort of some of our conditional cautions to get that immediate justice area. So, you know, I know that certainly within the Mansfield area, we've had people cleaning war memorials. I know within the Ashford area, we've had people doing litter picking. And that is, again, a visible deterrent to other people as well, as just actually not putting people into criminal justice systems. It's already bogged up enough. Actually doing sort of immediate justice, which has got a really good reoffending rate. I suppose a really bad reoffending rate, whichever way you look at it, but very low reoffending rate.
Surgeries?
Yeah, in terms of surgeries, we tend to put them where we have requests to put them, or where we have people who, where we have a space where people can talk to us in a suitable environment about local issues. Happily reconsider if sort of gazebos work, weather dependent, would be lovely today. But we also have people that want to come into an area and be in private when they talk. So we have to do that balance. We have got some vehicles that can be used in certain circumstances, but they're not always entirely appropriate. But I happily consider different ways of engaging with local communities that best fits with whether you're in a city centre or town centre or more rural or area. I'll certainly consider how we reshape that.
Needs to be considered.
Yes, definitely will.
Councillor.
Not used to these ones. Well, I live in a little village anyway, where we get a lot of, say, bikes and things. I know the big push. I know a lot have been taken away. But I'm worried about the town centre, because I get, every time I go into the town centre and work on, there's never any police or PCSOs. And I did say to the previous PCC last March, because I'm not on this panel, I'm a sub now, but whatever. And he promised that we would get police visible in town, and that was last March, not this March, last March. And I said to him, if it didn't happen, then I would be on his back. I was, but but I just wonder what you think is neighbourhood policing in that sense, from officers on the ground where they're visible. And we have PCSOs, but not very often now. And that's what we get. It doesn't matter what we do, police are never around. You know, that sort of comment. And I just wondered if that is going to be better. I'm really worried about that retracting them, because that's a good idea of if they've got, because we talked to 2 police when we did see them. I only took a picture because I didn't believe they were policemen, quite honestly. And they said that they wouldn't be retracted if there was something else at Mansfield, say where a colleague is. They would stay where they were unless it was something really, really important. So that's, you know, one of the things that happen. But I'm not seeing anything, so I'm just wondering what you'll consider neighbourhood policing, being in cars around, or actually police on the ground in town.
I think it's both. I think it's around dealing with issues that affect local people in local areas. The opportunity to be visible in a town and city centre is something that I'm keen to do, and we've looked at certain events such as when you get a bigger footfall, how we can deploy officers into that area so more people see them, more people feel safe, and it's at the right time of day to actually make a difference. We use some of our hotspot sort of methods now, that is around deploying an officer into an area for a very short period of time, retracting them, and then randomly, but sort of fairly funny, putting them back in. And that seems to have an issue around actually quelling some of our antisocial behaviour, violence, and other sort of acquisitive crimes. So we do that around certain areas. I don't think there will ever be enough officers for everyone to see them all the time without sounding too flippant about it. But what we can do is try and make sure that where we have sort of significant events, to make sure that visible presence is there. So nighttime economy is probably a good example. Workshop used to be deployed in Mansfield Town Centre for nighttime economy. That doesn't happen anymore. They will be deployed into Workshop for nighttime economy, which might finish earlier than it would in Mansfield, but that's where they will be base deployed. They'll either be on foot or sometimes in their vehicles, or a combination of the two. What I would say is that the utilisation rates of our neighbourhood officers, in other words, when they're out, how quickly they get deployed to deal with the neighbourhood issue, is fairly quick. So the days of the routine patrol, so they'll tend to walk to a job, deal with the job, walk to another job to deal with the job, because there's a lot of demand coming in through those doors. But they are there. We know the numbers of neighbourhoods we have. We now do have 7-day-a-week coverage. I'd hope that we can work out a way of getting it so people see and feel their presence. And a lot of the time it's using our sort of other communication channels to make sure that people are aware that if they haven't seen us there, they know that we've been there because we've made a difference.
Yeah.
It's how we get that communicated back to people is probably equally as important as them seeing the physical presence of the officer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the final question. I just want to check if Councillor Edwards, you wanted to ask a question. Do you still want to ask your question?
Yes, yeah. Well, it's been a terrific listen, and honestly, some of the stuff you've been saying, you're trying to pick up and keep up with it, to be honest. I mean, certainly on the neighbourhood policing, yeah, my reaction in the Meadows, we think we've gone downhill a bit on that recently, but certainly we thought the response following the shooting, the murder shooting, we thought the neighbourhood response on that was relatively poor. We had a mugging, case management, yeah, poor. Some exemplary work going on drug dealing in the Meadows. So I recommend you find out about how the police are working with the housing services and with the ASB teams and the City Council. Some really extraordinary stuff being done there. So well worth learning about that. And I was trying to reflect on what you might be saying if you were going through what we used to call corporate governance assessments in local governance, and they'd want to know if you were clear on what your ambition was, whether you'd got things planned out, whether the performance management systems were right, whether they were working, whether the culture was right, whether the capability was right, whether the capacity was right, and your overall legitimacy. And it seems to me, perhaps my reflection on what you've been saying is I suspect you think on capability, perhaps the sense of the staff are just a bit too junior. There's still a bit more to be done. And on capacity, whether you're a bit short on staff. If in assessing you corporately, I'd take those two out of those sellers, the things that perhaps you were highlighting. Have I got that right, or would you have wanted to emphasise other things in the 7 points I made about ambition, planning, performance management, culture, capability, capacity, and legitimacy?
I think in terms of the staff being too junior, I don't think they're too junior. I think that that's our workforce mix, as in, and it's the same across the country. So ideally, you'd have a far more sort of level curve of experience. But a lot of the staff that we have who have got less than sort of 5 years service, we have a number who have previously been PCSAs, a number who have previously been specials, worked in the control room, or come from outside bodies whereby they've got some fantastic experience and new ways of thinking. So I think it's, as much as it can be not ideal to have such a heavily weighted area to less than 5 years service for experience and tutorship and learning, it has got some amazing advantages as well. So I think it is definitely sort of two sides of a coin of, would I like it to be a much more linear workforce pattern, yes. Does it give us some advantages to have that new way of thinking with a lot of people joining at that time? Absolutely. So it's not, you know, quite there. In terms of short-staffed, you could probably double my staff and I'd ask for more, because I've just, you know, as in, I could, the more staff you have, the better you would be. But actually, we align our staff, and we've got probably more staff now than we probably had in, you know, a considerable period of time through investments that allow us to do the best we can within the sort of financial envelope that we have been provided. So I think in terms of, you know, we've worked very well with the PCC's office, worked very well with the Police and Crime Panel. You know, in the preset this time has allowed us to continue to do that investment in areas of business which we think are important, including neighbourhoods. And, you know, but again, if you said to me, would you like another 100 staff? Of course I'll say yes. I don't know a police officer or police force in the country who would turn you down.
I didn't see the Commissioner making a note of that.
No, I mean, it's the, but again, it's, you know, we would just simply be doing, you know, more things across wider areas with more staff. But again, with the staffing profile we've got, we deploy it effectively, we deploy it well, and I think that we've got people in the right place to deal with the right threats and risks that we have as an organisation, and we sort of self-assess ourselves against that, and HMIC will review that as well as they commit. I think the key issue there would be, that I would say is going forward, is the big area for us is the legitimacy question. And that comes back to the very first sort of bit I said around trust and confidence, is that it is very, very hard to earn trust and confidence. It is very, very easy to lose it. So how we make sure that we deploy our resources, our assets, the training we give to our staff, the culture that we build, making sure that everyone sees themselves as a problem solver, everyone sees themselves as being professionally curious and being an investigator, is how we can try and change that culture to be one where we focus on the victim, we focus on the public, and we have sort of, you know, less self-interest. I think we are moving in that direction and moving in that direction at pace, but I still think it is an area which is so fragile that we need to be really, really conscious about how we do not take anyone's trust and anyone's confidence for granted. And so out of all those areas of sort of focus, it's legitimacy that I would say I want to absolutely focus on. I will, you know, I said if you double my staff, I'll say thank you and do better.
Well, you said 100.
100, yeah. But if you, you know, then if you took 1,000 away, I would still do the absolute best I can with those, that, you know, the staff I have left to deploy the absolute best I can. But it's that legitimacy that however many staff I do or don't have, that can be lost. And without the legitimacy, I can't police by consent. I have 2,400 police officers, 1,500 staff and PCSOs. There's 1.2 million members of the public in Nottinghamshire. I need their consent. So that's why I think legitimacy is absolutely up there in terms of that priority.
Thank you. Got a final request from Abrahams. Well, I hope just this one.
It's actually one we missed earlier on, and it's a nice, easy one for you to finish.
And if you believe that, you believe anything.
Yeah. The police reform white paper sets out a vision for a new model of policing built on an ambitious programme of reform.
Yes.
What challenges do you foresee in relation to the forthcoming reforms, particularly with police form mergers, and how do you prepare to plan for them? There's also things to think about in terms of local government reorganisation, the creation of unitaries, how that affects community safety partnerships, and the role of EMCA. So a nice, easy one to finish with.
Thank you. I'd hate a difficult question. I mean, policing reform is probably long overdue. And the white paper sets out a sort of detailed vision that probably reassuringly, and I'll stress this at the beginning, has a clear focus on protecting local neighbourhood policing. That is probably, I think, the second bullet point in the sort of their priority orders. It introduces a national police service, which I we'll see probably developing at pace, because some of it is just bringing bodies together. Other parts of it is actually changing how we function as an area. It also looks at structural reform. So that will be, I'll call it sort of mergers is probably the best guess, but there's a Lord Hogan House doing review at the minute, and we're assuming mergers, but it could be redefining boundary lines, all the other different businesses. We're just waiting for that to come back through. It also sets sort of national standards and national pieces of intervention, and then looks at how we train and professionalise our workforce. So some key big bits of work that takes place pretty much from now, probably up until 2035, but the big bits of work and the decisions taking place really this year and next. In terms of how I see some of the challenges in relation to that, there's probably that period of uncertainty that people have. You know, people talk about the CAP badge, but am I working for Nottinghamshire Police, or am I working for the East Midlands Police Service? Am I merging with Derbyshire? Are we merging with Derbyshire or are we moving at totally different areas? And at the moment, nobody knows that. That's taking place at the same time as local government reorganisation, as you said. So what do the boundary changes look like that allow for that to take place? But these are all things that we can influence and sort of have a voice in as both police officers and the OPCC to try and help shape that area. And we are engaged with the national working groups in relation to that. In terms of other areas that I see as being sort of risks, whenever there's a significant period of change, that takes, you know, as in a lot of effort, energy, synergy across that. Well, once we know what the change is going to look like, we can start to focus that. But what I will say is, you know, policing is used to change. We're used to working at pace. We're used to having a culture of being problem solvers. So we'll make sure that any changes that do take place aren't to the detriment of service delivery that we're doing out there. And we'll make sure that we sort of have a dual running systems that allow us to effectively sort of deploy our resources whilst doing any change that takes place. I think the first key bit will be the formation of the National Police Service. There's talk of a Pathfinder sort of merger force. That will come after Lord Hogan Howe reports. I'll say late summer, I think it's September. And we'll have a rough idea of how many forces are being recommended, because we're 43 at the moment across England and Wales, plus some then non-Home Office forces. The number, as I was going to say, is probably going to be somewhere between 1 and 42. You know, and I think it's, you know, as in, you know, people will say, well, you know, the optimum number is 7, the optimum number is 12, the optimum number is 20. Simply don't know at the minute. But what I would say is we've got some really good regional working already underway through our sort of MSU, our Regional Organised Crime Unit, our Homicide Unit, our Counter-Terrorism Policing. So we're in a good position for that merger into the National Centre. We have good partnerships already within our local government reorganisation around how we'll sort of shape policing and partnerships as that goes forward. And this is just the next national evolution. So I think it will be busy, it'll be a complex landscape, but I think it's a landscape that we're involved in, we're being engaged in, and we will see how it pans out over the next few sort of weeks and months as to how it shapes up. But one thing I can say is whether it's in the informal process or through obviously the Commissioner's office, we'll make sure that obviously you're kept up to date as a police and crime panel in relation to what the national direction looks like. But the white paper, when it came out, I would say, I don't mean it was a surprise to everybody. It wasn't like shared with policing before. It was very much a, you know, this is a white paper that's coming out, and we will obviously now look to influence as best we can as the Nottinghamshire Police aspect of it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point at which to stop. So first of all, thank you, colleagues, for your contribution, but more importantly, thank you, Steve, for very fulsome replies. Thank you for the work you've done when we've come and had those briefings. They've been very informative, and so thank you for that. Just want to ask, do you feel you've had an opportunity to say everything you would like to say to the panel?
Yes. No, thank you for the opportunity.
So thank you very much, Steve, for attending. Thank you, Commissioner and your team. I now will read the formal exclusion of the public, if you'll bear with me for a few moments. The committee will be invited to resolve that the public be excluded for the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that discussions are likely to involve disclosure of exempt information described in Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Thank you. Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.